Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this presentation. I will be joined today by my colleagues Martin Sitefani and Kondwani Banda, and we will talk about our ECSA-based method for the development of metallurgical and chemical engineering candidates, which we piloted at Mintec in the pyrometallurgy division. So I'm just going to start my slideshow. As I said, my name is Yolette Steenkamp. I'm a chief engineer here in the pyrometallurgy division at Mintec. I have some extensive experience both in industry, on corporate environment, and in government institutions at University of Pretoria, and also here at Mintec. So I have a passion for the development of young engineers and engineering professionals, and both Martin and Kondwani are examples of that. So background on Mintec. Mintec is a state-owned science council. Its history dates back to 1934, and it conducts research in metallurgy. So the shareholder of Mintec is the government. And so the research is the one component. The other component is that it trains people, especially engineering candidates, through various programs. We have MQA interns here, we have NRF interns here, we have our own bursars, and we also have WIL interns. So there's a number of interns that comes through, or youngsters that comes through and spend a year, 2 years, 4 years, maybe even longer, if they enjoy the working environment with Mintec. And I think in that sense, Mintec really contributes to the South African economy. I know I didn't come through Mintec system. I was trained by ECSA, and I went through my first 10 years of my career was spent on various plants and projects within the ECSA group, and or what it became after privatization. And that is, I know the people that I work with from Mintec just had a different approach, which I admired. And that is a joy for me to work here at the facility because of that. It's a very scientific approach, very much thinking about the work that you do, and also understanding pyrometallurgy very well, the principles of pyrometallurgy. And that is what Mintec offers to the country. The pyrometallurgy division itself is known internationally for the development of applications of DC arc furnace technology. In South Africa, we have the ferrochrome smelters, we have the ilmenite smelters, and I was involved with the commissioning of the ilmenite smelters in KZN Sands. And all of that, if you trace back the path, the ideas were conceptualized and tested here. Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a chief engineer here. I joined Mintec in December 2012. Kondwani joined in August of December 2014. Kondwani joined in August 2014 as an MQA intern, and Martin in 2014 also in January as an in-service trainee. So we're all basically the same time that we spent here. So the problem when I joined Mintec, I had people reporting to me for the first time, and for engineers in training, and of which Kondwani was one. And the problem that I had was how to train the candidates constructively within the framework of normal day-to-day business. So if I can unpack that, I was not trained through a graduate in training program. I was privileged enough to have to manage my own development. And what I've seen with my peers and what I've seen here also is a formalized training program is not necessarily to the benefit of the trainee, because it takes the power away from the trainee. You just become, you've been through varsity where somebody structured your training for you and you just ran with that program, you just fit into it. And now you come to the work environment where you actually need to take ownership of your own career now. But you're not empowered to do so. So again, a formalized training structure, although the intention is good, the intention is there to provide a framework where people can develop, but you still force them to train or develop or get exposure to the things that you want them to. And what I've also found at Mintech is we spend a lot of energy and effort of the more senior researchers in this development rather than the juniors supporting our work, which is actually what we want. We want junior engineers or technicians or technologists to come in to execute some of the work, to execute it really well, to the extent that in my case I can publish, or we can patent, or we can develop a technology or service that can really benefit the society, rather than me spending time and holding people's hands. And what we did is develop what I call the matrix, or the method then that we're going to share today with you. And it was a action research, if you want to call it like that, project. It was something that I've done. I've mentored youngsters when I was at the university. But this method I could implement now and basically run for 3-4 years with Gondwani and his 3 colleagues. And then later on with Martin and he also supervised a group of 4 people where we use this method for them to develop their own careers and take ownership of their careers, but also develop the skills required of an engineering professional. So the purpose of the presentation, the purpose is to share the method with a broader community, as we believe that the method empowers candidate engineering professionals to manage their own development. The method also provides a framework for engineering professionals to mentor candidates constructively. So it's like having an agenda. With every meeting, we have an agenda. We have I love spreadsheets. I'm of that age. And put down a spreadsheet and we chat about you and your career and the development thereof. And then we share, we believe also that by sharing the method via the Southern African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy, it will benefit the broader community. So what is the framework? The ECSA model, or the Engineering Council of South Africa model for professional development. I took this from their website, and basically ECSA plays a very important role in the management of the quality of education and practice of engineering professionals in South Africa. So all the university programs are accredited, or they're supposed to be accredited with ECSA, and ECSA then ensures that they meet the international standards for engineering education. So once you're professionally registered, it's a very nice, it's a good service to the community if you participate in these accreditation programs. So go to the university if you want to change the curriculum, go there as part of the ECSA team that evaluates or accredit the programs, and then you will definitely have it's a tool to influence the curriculum and the way people are trained. Then upon graduation or certification, ideally a youngster needs to register as a candidate within ECSA. And then, so the accredited programs take about 4 years, and then the training and experience, that takes about 3 years. And then once you meet the standards for professional competency, you can register as a professional engineer. Once you are registered as a professional engineer, we need to on it's actually fill in the forms on an annual basis, but every 5 years you get evaluated. And that's where you'll hear about CPDs, continuous professional development. But that ensures that people don't not develop. So you basically, if I was trained 20 years ago, or even more, then it ensures that my knowledge don't get stuck there, if I want to put it like that. I think if you work in a research environment, the risk of that happening is 0, but it can potentially happen, that your knowledge gets dated. And that's the purpose of this CPD program. So the categories, we have professional engineers, and then before you register, you're a candidate engineer, professional engineering technologist, or then candidate engineering technologist, and then professional engineering technicians, candidate engineering technicians, and then professional certified or certificated engineers. Those are people that follow the artisan route to become professional engineers. So the categories are described in more detail on the website, and I added the link there for you. But the ones that we will address today is professional engineer and then professional engineering technologist.
Sorry, Alex, to interrupt you. Are you meant to be sharing your screen?
Yes.
Oh, because we can't see your presentation. I thought you were not sharing your screen, but yeah, we can't see your presentation. So if you can just share your screen with us, please.
I do apologize for that. Can you see my screen now?
We see your screen, but yeah, there we go. That's better than what's gone now.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I'm just going to quickly go through this then again. There's the model, and I think it is a pity you didn't see this while I was talking, but in any case, you can go to the links, and then yes, the categories, and there's the accredited qualifications. So why are our qualifications internationally recognized is because ECSA signed the Washington Accord for engineering programs, Sydney Accord for BTech programs, and Dublin Accord for national diploma programs. And the universities have to, their qualifications are accredited every 5 years. And that means that our qualifications are internationally recognized, and that's also a very important role that ECSA plays, is to make sure that we do stick to the requirements of these accords. So what is important for you to have, also according to the ECSA program, is that you are your chief executive, or then somebody that he or she delegated to, has to sign a commitment to structured training and experience in accordance with ECSA's requirements and undertakes to train candidates. So that's a 2-page document, but it basically the company commits to training you according to the standards of ECSA. And then this is typically signed for each engineering discipline at the site of, and also for site of training. And then the mentors can be provided ideally by an employer or can be solicited via voluntary associations such as the SIIMM. This is the gist of the candidacy programs, and I'm done now with my section. So I'll hand over to Martin and Kondwani after this. But what I call the matrix, that is the tool that we use to manage the training of the youngsters for 3 years. And basically take all the projects or all the activities that they are involved in and plot that against the outcomes required by ECSA for engineering candidates. So the outcomes are defined. These are the documentation that's to me the gist of this program, and that is the training and mentoring guide for professional categories, a discipline-specific training guideline for candidate engineers in metallurgical or chemical engineering. That's the ones I have experience with. Acceptable engineering work for candidate engineering technologists for registration as professional engineering technologists. So this one specifically is related to the technologists, and the previous one to the candidate engineers. And then CPD is the guidelines on continuing professional development and the renewal of registration. So you have the matrix. On the top, we have the projects. On the side, we have the outcomes, and then training progression. With every mentoring session, what we do is discuss, but where do we lie? Where does this candidate lie? Was this job just a job where you were supposed to be exposed to something? Was it a job where you assisted in executing it? whether you're a participant, that you contribute, or were you the one responsible. And the idea is in the beginning of your training program, the task will be mostly at level A and B, and after 12 months, after a year, most of the tasks will be C and D, and on the third year of your training, you will be performing mostly on level E. And that's really important, is to demonstrate how you take responsibility for the work that you do. I think that was one of the, long time ago, but one of the criticisms that one of my professors had against formalized training programs is that people stay too long in these levels A to C and never take responsibility for work. So it's more, if you can choose, it's almost more important to do a smaller project, but you take full responsibility for it, because then you demonstrate that you can perform on a level where you work without supervision, where you work, you have the responsibility of a professional engineer or engineering professional. And yeah, so ideally, I think that's the ideal place. We want the older, more experienced people want the youngsters to be is after 24 months, I want to give you a job and you execute it. And that is, this program really enables you to reflect on your progress. And you can also say, I mean, in the mentoring sessions I had initially with my team every month, then we started with a system where they did peer mentoring meeting every month, and I met with them every 3 months. And the intention of, although I was their supervisor at that stage, the intention was for that meeting to be about them and their development and their developmental needs. And we would see gaps in their program, which I then can go either address as the supervisor or ask then some of my colleagues to assist with. Martin, over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, that's good. So I'm going to take you through a couple of steps that you usually would take to registering as an engineering technologist or engineer with ECSA. And let me paint the scenario. So you were just at school, you worked hard, things were tough, but you managed to go through. And so you're beginning your career and you arrive the first day at work. What are the steps that you basically need to take in order to ensure that you register either as an engineering technologist, if you went the BTech stream, which is the stream that I took, or as an engineer? So there's basically 5 steps that you would usually take. Step 1 is on the first day when you arrive, or the first week that you arrive at work, it's important that you register as a candidate engineering technologist or engineer. So before you even acquire any experience, ECSA does allow you to actually register as a candidate. It's simple. You basically fill in a form that is provided on the ECSA website. You pay. It's a very small fee. I think it's below 1,000 Rand. And then you submit the document. And within a couple of months, ECSA will come back to you and say, you are now officially registered as a candidate engineering technologist or engineer. That doesn't mean that ECSA has accredited you, but basically what they do is they add you to the system, and also the emails that they usually distribute to their members, you receive those membership. The reason why it's important to do that as early as possible is it just helps you with reminding you that I need to register for ECSA. And so if I'm receiving emails from ECSA, if I'm receiving regular feedback from ECSA, it's a good reminder that I'm working towards the registration with ECSA. The second thing that I would say you need to do is you need to identify a mentor, preferably within the organization, the company that you're working for, and someone who's ECSA registered, because they'll help you with your process of registering towards ECSA. I do understand that sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you don't have someone within your organization. Sometimes you don't even have someone who's ECSA registered. And so you might need to go outside of the organization. But it's important that you find a mentor. I can speak from experience. Let's get Steenkamp helped me a lot towards ECSA registration. And so it's helpful to actually identify a mentor who will be able to help you in this. The third thing, and this will be the crux of what Wesley, my colleague, will speak about, I'll mention a few things, is to develop your metrics. This is really, 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 really important, and I'll elaborate on it a bit more, and then Wesley will go into detail. The fourth thing, once you've developed your metrics, you've gone through your 3-year plan training, you've put in all your information down, is that you then need to complete a form from ECSA with a couple of things that you need to put in there. It's quite a substantive form. But if you've done your metrics very well, it makes the process of completing the form quite easy. And then people usually say, yay, I'm done. I need to stop there, I'm finished. But it's actually not, as you elaborated earlier. With ECSA, it's a continuous development. And so every 5 years, you will have to demonstrate how you've been actually growing and developing in your career. And that's where the CPD points come into effect. The next slide. Okay, I just wanted to talk a bit about the metrics. Just to give you a bit of context, with registering as an engineering technologist or engineer with ECSA, what ECSA requires is they require you to have completed the 3-year or so training term, and then you need to fill in documents that are available on the ECSA registration website. But the problem is, if you simply wait until after 3 years and then try and fill in those documents, the task can be greatly daunting. And so the metrics is defined as just the hard drive of your career. It's just a document where you capture all your details regarding your career. So as you're going along in your career, you are capturing your details that will then make it easier for you later on to fill in that ECSA document. The aim of the metrics, as I just mentioned, is to just keep record of your engineering activities. And then the structure is that you would record all your engineering activities, weighing them against the ECSA requirements. For you to be able to register with ECSA as an engineering technologist or engineer, there are certain requirements that ECSA has. And so you are able to then put in your information and weigh it up against ECSA requirements. How does this help? I've already alluded to some of the things. It just allows you to keep record of your training. It's hard after I've had people after 10 years wanting to fill in their ECSA documents and register. It's hard to remember the exact things that you were doing. Also, it helps you to track your development. Sometimes you don't realize as you're going in your career that you've remained stagnant. And so it helps you to sort of be able to weigh, how am I moving? Am I fulfilling the ECSA requirements of what an engineer or engineering technologist is? And it also just helps you to identify development gaps. That was the case in my point, because when I had to fill in my ECSA registration documents, I realized that there were actually gaps in my development. And so I was able to see that with my metrics, and then I was able to then look for opportunities within the organization, like just doing design work or so forth, to be able to fill in those gaps. And so, yeah, that's just a bit of a small sketch of the importance of the metrics. Wesley will elaborate by showing you an example.
Thank you. Okay. I can't hear you.
Oh, okay, so good to go. So my job basically today will be taking into detail with regards to how to now go ahead and then track your development using the matrix. So the matrix, basically, it's an Excel spreadsheet, as Martin went through, trying to also give you context. And the idea is, if I am your mentor and I am to guide you through your career and until the point where you have to register for ECSA, I want to have a point where I can measure specific outputs from the work that you're doing, but most importantly, be able to mentor you effectively and also make sure that you are meeting those ECSA outcomes. So the matrix basically is that tool that allows me as a mentor to find gaps and help you move towards the right direction. And obviously then that would mean having discussions with your supervisor as well to make sure that they give you exposure into certain areas of your projects or activities that will help you meet those outcomes. But from a candidate point of view, this is your tool to now also measure your progress and your growth. Now, what this helps you to do is you need to track specific items that you will implement or track the type of work that you're doing strategically such that it addresses those outcomes. But again, as Martin had mentioned, it also helps when it comes to the end of the 3 years, when now you have to go back and try and remember which project did you work on February of 2017, for example. It might not be easy to try and remember that, but when you have the matrix, it makes life more convenient, especially going back to the specific details that you addressed in that project. So taking you through the matrix, the first area that you'd find, which is the top section of the spreadsheet, would be where now you record the projects that you're working on. So this is just an example of one of the interns I'm mentoring. And as you can see, moving up, going down of the spreadsheet, you would first list your projects. Now your projects would be listed, say from 1 up to 7 or any number that you've worked on. Now with each one of those projects, moving from left to right, you then associate the duration that you're working on that project. Now, if you look, for example, 1 would always be associated with novel TIC, 2 would always be associated with, say, the TICL pilot plant. Now, it's important to remember that because then as you scroll down through the spreadsheet itself, that number will always be associated to that specific project. And as I mentioned, you'd also want to highlight the duration of those specific projects, because when you do the write-up as well, they will always request the period that you've worked on that specific project. Now, if I move to the next page. So for the next section, which is the 5.1 to 5.4, that's where you sort of now give a bit of background in terms of your project and some of the things that you were involved in that specific project. So if it was a project which involved investigating a specific problem, you then mark an X as you've met that outcome. If it involved problem solution, again, you'd mark an X. If it was execution and implementation, you'd mark an X. And then responsibility. There's a slide that you're led short where you move from getting exposed up to where you're now performing. Again, you put the responsibility that you had for that specific project. And also ECSA wants to see that you've moved from training, to a point where you're contributing, to a point where you're actively running. So that needs to also come out across in your matrix, as well as at the point where you now have to write your engineering report. And another important aspect is to put in comments wherever you feel you've met an outcome. So for example, if you've met the outcome on problem investigation, your comment would be, I investigated a problem that involved X and Y. Problem solution would then be, I developed a solution that addressed this problem by doing that and that. So by putting those specific comments will, again, as I mentioned, help you down the line after the 3 years when you now have to write your report. Now, with this specific example, it's quite specific towards engineers. For engineering technologies, you find that some of their outcomes are slightly different, but they still follow the same layout in terms of plant operation, research, and so on. So for 6.1, focuses on outcomes that you would meet if you're in a plant operation environment. And some of those outcomes, just to go, maybe I'll go through 3 of them. For example, measurement and analysis of performance data. If you've met that outcome, you put an X. And again, the comment would be, I had to evaluate the performance of this unit. I had to measure this and then. So again, it comes out in terms of what you've done to meet that outcome. And as your mentors, I'd also want to see that comment, because you're so selling it to me to say you actually have met that outcome. So putting an X without a comment, I would definitely frown upon that, because I want to understand, why do you think you have met that outcome? And again, at a later stage, that adds value to your report writing as well. 6.2 would then be any outcomes that you've met in terms of specification, design, erection, and commissioning of plants and components. Again, if there's specific outcomes that you've met in that area, you then put an X. Now, what's important to highlight there, for example, if you look at 6.22, project 1 up to 5, there's no outcome, there's no project that meets that specific outcome. So again, as your mentor, it means I now need to propose areas that you can work in to meet those specific outcomes. If I'm not your direct supervisor, it means I need to have a chat with your supervisor to say, please give so-and-so exposure in this area. That way they can address this specific outcome towards their professional development. And to find that for us, especially at MinTech, working in a research and development type of environment, we tend to meet most of our outcomes in this area, 6.3. And then if you find that you're working in a production plant, most likely you'll meet most of the outcomes in 6.1. But it's very important to expose yourself in areas where, let's say, they're like your weakness. So areas where you do not directly work in them, it's very good to get exposure in that. And sometimes you find that the exposure that you might get would be by directly working with other people in that specific area. To give an example, if I'm in an environment that's research orientated, working on projects that involve pilot plant commissioning and execution in that area allows me to get exposure in that area for a short period, even though most of my work is in the research and development area. Now, some of the aspects that you might find there would be, say, 6.31, we have to develop a clear understanding of a problem opportunity to be investigated by conducting a critical analysis of literature and other relevant information and assembling of documentation on the subject in an organized manner. So you can find that that involves researching the specific problem that you have, finding solutions towards that, which evolves around literature review. And again, if you're in a plant-based environment where it's production, I think also doing your master's study in research would allow you to get exposure in that, because then some of the activities that you might do that are research-based, you can do them on the plant or do them at the university, but that will help you also address the areas where you do not get full exposure in. Another aspect that's quite very important, I think, it's the continuous professional development, the CPD activities. As much as you have graduated your undergrad, ECSA still wants to see that you are continuing developing yourself. And some of the activities that illustrate that you continue developing yourself would be the courses that you might attend, any self-study that you're doing, attending technical conferences, attending seminars and webinars. And I want to emphasize that some of these activities you probably have to pay for, and some of the activities are readily available to you. So for example, SAIM will often put webinars that are taking place or conferences and so on. You being a member of SAIM gives you exposure to CPD activities. Most importantly, ECSA wants you to be part of a voluntary association. That way, it actually shows that you are contributing back to the to your discipline, but more importantly, you are still learning from a discipline. So there's that mutual working relationship between the SAIMM as well as ECSA, because you benefit from both, okay? And other things that you might also get CPD from would be symposia, any organized visits, site visits to plants, different organizations, as well as meeting professional bodies. Now, with meeting professional bodies, this would be where you're not only part of the SIMM, but now you're actually part of the SIMM Council, where now you get to meet with other professionals and, you know, come up with activities as well as add back and give back to, you know, to your discipline, to the mining and metallurgy space. So it's very important that as much as you are working towards your career development, but you are still giving back to the mining and mineral sector, where you're actively learning, actively developing, but also you're giving back by putting your efforts, to add value to the space. So all these activities, when you now write your report, it's something that you will also bring out to say, I've made my outcomes, I've done so and so and so. But in addition to that, I think it's outcome 11, which looks at CPD activities, to say, I believe I've made outcome 11 because I've attended this self-study, I've attended these conferences, I've been part of these professional bodies and so on. So that's something that will definitely have to come out as well. I think that brings me to the end of my section, and then I'll hand it back over to Dr. Steenkamp.
Oh, thank you very much to both Martin and Kondwani. I think you explained the method very well, and it's important to get the perspective to get your perspective on this. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for participating. I'm going to stop sharing here, and then I'll ask Kondwani and Martin to just switch on their cameras, and then I'll do the same, and then we can start with the questions. Good. So if you have any questions, we can use the Q&A. I don't see any questions written there, or if you want to.
There is a comment, well, more of a question as well. So I'll just read it out. So it's from Madeleine. And okay, it goes, I understand the ideal is that you registered as a candidate from day one. I have worked for many years, but only attempting registration now. And what is your advice?
I think it's like Martin said, it's hard when you've worked for a long time to do the paperwork. So basically now you've done the training and you do have the experience. When you do write up, I think the ECSA guidelines says you write up the details of the past 5 years, just to demonstrate that you meet the requirements of a professional engineer. But you have the experience now. It's a matter of analyzing that experience and then completing the paperwork. I will share via Camila. It's notes that I handed out to people at WITS last year, and that explains the steps that you need to take. So I would say the most important is that develop the matrix for yourself. When about 10 years ago, I did workshops for people that just want to register. I don't do that now anymore, but basically we use the matrix to analyze. You take your CV and you analyze your CV against the matrix to see, but I do have a specific experience and I have it at the level where I was responsible for it. And then it's a matter of completing the paperwork. And if you sit down, you can do it in one day, but I had a workshop with my team of a week, and even a week was not enough. So, it is not a easy job to do. But the best is the sooner you can do it, the better. Yes, Martin.
Just to add, I think we said it's hard, but I don't think it's impossible. I'm currently actually working with 2 people who have that situation where they've been in the industry for so long and now they want to register. I would go back to what we said. I think the first thing to do is to take the forms, put them aside, and go straight to your metrics and try and record everything you've done. It's nice because we're sharing the metrics with you, I believe, so that makes it easier for you. Put everything you've done, do that first, and that would make it easier for you to then complete. So it's hard but possible, definitely possible.
It's definitely, and I did my paperwork after 8 years. So, I guess one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this is I did not have somebody guiding me. And then at some stage I decided, but this is now important to become registered. And what do? And I go and find out on the ECSA website myself. So I think the matrix is the ultimate tool. And yes, as Martin said, I've asked both Martin and Kondwani to also share with you via Camila examples of the matrix that you can do. Okay. Madeleine?
Also, maybe to add on to that, I think it's very important also that once you start the writing up of your actual report, I'm not sure at what stage you are when you say only registering, whether you're registering as a candidate now or actually registering for your PRN. But if it's PRN, I think definitely getting some assistance to make sure that your work is actually aligned in terms of your writing style and so on. Because what I've noticed is that most people go ahead and then write the report, and then when they're done, they go ahead and then submit to ECSA. And in most cases, you find that it gets rejected and it's returned on the basis that they feel the work that you've done is not, what's the word that they use? It's not complex. So it did not address complex engineering problems. And one of the aspects to actually address that, it's the way you write, right? The way you write your report, making sure that you're linking your outcomes to your engineering training report as well. So those things need to speak together. They need to be aligned. And in essence, you are selling yourself to say, I think I've met these outcomes by doing so and so. So you're selling yourself. So the way you write that, the way you structure it is very important. And even the type of projects that you will select to represent you, again, those are very important. So again, as an advice, I'd say that as you're writing your report, make sure that you have someone to guide you through that process, someone that you can bounce off ideas as well, versus writing it in isolation.
But it can be written in isolation. I did that, so it is possible.
Correct,
okay,
yes.
good.
So the other questions from Paul.
You can read it.
Okay, so the question is, do I only register when I find work?
I think, Mpo, it is sad that you don't have work. I have to say that. It is not, you can, the idea is with the training is that you do practical training and during the period that you are registered as a candidate engineer. Okay, so you need that practical training of 3 years before you can register as a professional. And what you can do is you can develop your matrix, and then you can go to companies. And we've had that at Mentec, where people just volunteer. So you basically work as a volunteer at a company. So you decide, I want to know how to do a mass and energy balance. And then I go to a company and say, I want to do a mass and energy balance for you as part of my training. Will you allow me to do that? I think what the matrix does is it really, really empowers you. And as soon as, I think if you do something for free and you demonstrate that you are really willing, we had an intern here that came, she worked for about a year as a volunteer with us, and she was the happiest person in our division every day. And eventually she got a formal internship, but sorry for that. But I think that if you're around and you can demonstrate your capabilities, it's a form of marketing yourself. And yeah, I think you cannot register as a professional engineer if you haven't had the practical training. That is really important. But if you don't have a work, you can use the matrix as a tool for you to volunteer to develop specific skills. And if you can work with a mentor there that's registered with ECSA, it will make your registration process easier later on. I don't know, any thoughts from the panel members?
No, I think you've put it, you've hit the nail on the rest, but I think one essentially needs to be employed or needs to be in a place where they actually actively practicing engineering for them to now register. Because in essence, it doesn't make sense you register as a candidate, for example, and you are at home, because then they will give you that period where you have 3 years to actually now demonstrate that you've grown and so on, but nothing has happened in that period. So rather first get an internship or some form of activity within the engineering space. Yeah.
I think internships, and there's not only, there's MQA internships, not only at state institutions, you can also get them, or government institutions, you can also get them in industry. The internship doesn't pay a lot of money, but it does offer you a lot of opportunities. And I think if you have the matrix and you know what you want to get out of this 1 year or 2 years of internship, it is really empowering. And I mean, Kondwani is an example of that. He did not go through a formal, the formal GDP, like his 3 colleagues in my group went. We just work with a matrix, and he used each, and it does not matter who gave him what type of job. He did it because he understood where it fits into the matrix. And it's so, it's really nice to see how he used the same tool to develop the people reporting to him. But you can and he was, after a year or 2, he just developed much faster. I think 50% is just because of the person that he is, but and he would probably have developed as fast in a different system as well. But I do think that the matrix and the mentoring system that we developed basically empowered him to grow, and he pushed himself. It also, I mean, if people expect you only to observe, that is what you will do. But if you know, now I want to work towards execution, it gives you an opportunity to basically compete against yourself, and that is where you want to be. You're taking ownership of your career. But yeah, if you're registered as a candidate and you just sit at home, that is not, you're wasting your money. That is basically it. Use the opportunity, register as a candidate, get a mentor, and then volunteer, or really look for these internship opportunities. Yeah, that will be to your benefit.
So there's a question from Nyandano, and the question is, I have been working for 9 years without being registered. In 2020, I registered as a candidate. What is the best route for me to get registered as PRN?
I think you're in the same situation as the first question, the person that asked the first question. So you basically just need to do the paperwork now. So step 1 is develop the matrix for yourself. Take your CV, match it against the outcomes required by ECSA, and Kondwani will share with you that example, and then do the paperwork. And I will also share the notes. There's the links to all the documentation that you need to complete. But 9 years is a good time. As I said, I did mine after 8 years. And I was also not registered as a candidate. It is good. I think I registered as a candidate and 6 months later submitted my PRN application forms. So, yeah.
And I think something I also want to just highlight as well, the difference between managing your own development without registering as a candidate and managing your own development registered as a candidate. The difference between the two is, if you go the candidate route, especially early into your career, you most likely will be PRN within the 3 to 4 years period. So meaning you can do it sooner in record time. If you do not do that, what will happen is that you will not be aware in terms of what outcomes you've already met. And in essence, you might even spend way longer than the 4 years before you register. And one of the things that also do that is because we tend to put it at the back of our minds. And as soon as you do not have it as a set goal, I think that's what tends to delay most of the people. If you put it there to say, in 3 years or 4 years, I want to see myself as PRN, every little thing that you do will have meaning. And every project that you're doing as well will be measured such that you know that it's leading you to that direction. But not registering as a candidate, in essence, you put it at the back, and eventually something one day will trigger you and say, okay, I actually need to do my report for ECSA. So that's the major difference, to be honest, between the two. Just that with one allows you to measure, and because you're measuring it, you'll always improve and help you get there faster. But if you don't measure, hence you might find that it takes quite a while before you get there. And one of the challenges would be that you'll have so much work that you have done, and now trying to narrow it down to say, what exactly do I want to focus on? That most likely would be the tumbling, like the stumbling block. But once you can get through over that, understanding what you want to use to represent you in the report, then I think everything else from there is like downhill. As soon as you start getting your words onto that paper, it will all be easy moving downwards.
You start with the, as with a with a master's dissertation. Martin, I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective as well, because your training was initially unstructured, and then I joined you guys after how many years? 3 years? 4 years of training. So I only joined towards the end when you were basically analyzing your development. What would your advice be or your comments be on these?
Yeah, on my side, just to maybe give you a bit of context, I knew ECSA from a distance. I knew that there were a few people in my organization who were passionate about ECSA, and then other people, including my supervisor at the time, who was in ULED, were not necessarily interested about ECSA. And so for me, ECSA was not a real phenomenon. It wasn't something that I considered was important, because I mean, if my supervisor doesn't have ECSA, what there? Do I really need it? And so if I reflect back on my training during those years, I was definitely hardworking, but there was not any structure to my training. The idea of degree of responsibility and me having to grow in responsibility was not even in my mind at all. It was just, I come to work, I do my work, I finish it, I do the best I can do, and that's it. And so when Dr. Uleb then introduced us to ECSA, and then I evaluated my training, I remember the first session we had, it was quite intense. I realized that, sure, I have so many gaps. My training is not as structured as it could be, and I have so many gaps and so many things that I need to address as someone who aspires to be an engineering technologist. And so what ECSA then did is that it helped my training to be a bit more structured, and it actually helped me to take in even more responsibilities and start looking for extra things to do that could allow me to demonstrate that I do fulfill the requirements of what an engineer is. And so, yeah, I highly recommend ECSA for that very purpose, because it helped me in my training. It's still helping me even now.
It creates a structure, and what's nice about this method, it's not dependent on whoever your employer is or the mentor that you have. Mentor helps, I think, but even if you don't have a mentor, it still gives you an opportunity to self-mentor and to go and ask for jobs. West, I see there's more questions.
Yeah, so question from Paul. One more. I did training in 2016 for a year and a couple of academia projects with my university from 2017 to 2020. Can I use that work I did register as a candidate at the current moment, or need to start from scratch when I find work?
This is my opinion, so it's not necessarily, you have to check that with ECSA, but I do think you can. For master's studies, you can claim a year. So even if you study 2-year full-time master's project, a year of that can contribute to your training. And yes, academics, even if you teach or you are helping with the practicals or things like that, all of that, go and analyze, go and develop your matrix, go and analyze the tasks that you did. You might be surprised, to what extent you do meet these requirements. I think you might have a problem or a challenge then with your level of responsibility. That might be a challenge compared to somebody that has been working full-time. But it is. It was interesting. We had an intern here, and then she went to work for a year on a plant, and she was very pro ECSA for the 2 years of her internship. And then when she came back, she said she wasted her time on the plant because the level of responsibility that she had at Mintech was much higher than what it was at the plant. But I still think if you go and analyze that systematically, the time on the plant where you were a junior and not had a lot of responsibility, you do get a lot of exposure that people that work in just one environment for a short time don't get. And again, Paul, please look out for internships. As I said, they don't necessarily pay a lot of money, but they do give you a lot of opportunities. And if you use the matrix to develop yourself during that time, you just, it's like Martin said, I think with my first meeting I met with them as a group, and it was like I needed to pull out this whole development. I need to drag them through this. And at some stage I said to them, listen, I'm developed already. So this is yours, take ownership. And they really took it to heart. And after that, having a meeting with them was a joy, because I would walk in and I could see each one of those 4 around the table took ownership of their development. And that is what we want to see with this. Any comments from Kondwani or Martin on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that any training that takes place after you have graduated is considered training. So if the experience that you got at the university and the 1-year training as well, if all that happened after you got your BSc or your BTech, that everything that you've done there, that's engineering activities, then it does, it's something that you can use to track your training. The only thing is when there's breaks in between, you need to tell ECSA why was there breaks in between. And if it was because there wasn't any opportunities, then it's a good enough reason to say, during this period, it wasn't good enough. I didn't have any opportunities for me to actually do any engineering activities. They will understand that. And then when you continue working, then you just build up on that. The key thing is minimum needs to be 3 years, and it can be more, depending on the type of projects that you get exposed to, the type of work that you get exposed to. I think that's what's key. So we actually have 3 minutes till the end. The last 2 questions sort of speak together. One is from Michael, the other is from Demi. So from Demi, the question is, why do you think it is a prerequisite to register as a PR-Eng overseas to be a qualified engineer? Whereas in SA, it is seen as an optional requirement and seen more as a status symbol. And then what Michael then was asking is that, does my ECSA qualification translate to a better job placement? In that as I improve when they get PR-Eng, they'll get a better job in their employment structure.
Yes, it does. I think the big thing with the whole ECSA thing is that you are acknowledged by your peers as being able to operate at the level of a professional. So it does. It definitely, and especially in a depressed job market, if there's more than one candidate CV on my desk and I look at the one is registered with ECSA, the other one not, the one with ECSA registration, you already have that stamp. I know you can execute work at the level that's required of an engineering professional. So in terms of a career choice, please do it. And then in terms of international recognition, that is a requirement. I think that is a problem in South Africa, that anybody can work here as call themselves an engineer when they're not registered. It's like I think the ECSA needs to fill a gap. Where we don't have CAs working as CAs if they're not registered with their council. We don't have doctors working as doctors if they're not registered with their council, and their council can't kick them out. It's important that we get the same for engineering professionals.
And I think in addition to that, there was, I think, I can't remember exactly when, but ECSA did try to put it across, I think, to the government to say, if you are PR-Eng, you should get preference when it comes to employment. And I think that was shut down by the Competition Board of Council. I think something along those lines. But it was shut down to say it will bring an unfair competition. Yeah, it will be unfair to people that aren't interested in doing PR-Eng. So I think that's the challenge currently in SA. And ECSA did definitely put an effort to try and put that across to say, this is what we want. All engineers should work towards PR-Eng. But again, because it was shut down, I don't think there hasn't there's been any traction to try and push that forward again. And if you can, I think, Google it, you definitely find more information around that area. But I think from my personal point, I found that if you're going to apply for a job, if you're going to work with international companies as well, having a PRN is definitely something that it's reputable. People can have confidence in the type of work that you're going to produce versus someone that doesn't. And again, it's discipline specific. I know with civil engineers, they will not sign off designs if they don't have PRN. It's just that I think within the metallurgy and chemical space, it isn't as strict per se, but I'd like to think if also you're a chemical engineer and you're designing plants, you still need the PRN to sign off that specific design.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for participating. Also, Martin and Kondwani, I think, and I trust that you all are now empowered to take ownership of your own careers and your own development. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.